You are now listening to the Mental Health Check-In Podcast.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to everyone listening at whatever time you're listening. I am Joe Anthony Myrick, as always, and you are listening to the Mental Health Check-In Podcast, a podcast dedicated to spreading mental health awareness as a means to help us all heal. So let's just all heal together, just in time for 2021. Happy New Year, everybody. You made it to the end of 2020, knowing what 2020 was, and now you're here. You survived. You survived. You survived. And you should be proud of yourself for that. Now let's manifest some beautiful things for the world, for us, for each other, going into 2021. And let's put in the work to achieve all of it. And just hope that nothing out of our control prevents us from reaching our goals. And there is no better way, for me at least, to bring in the new year than with two phenomenal guests, Felicia Rose and ALove. If you're not familiar with them, they are two sex-friendly, sex-positive founders of a new queer-friendly platform. It's called The New Queer Order, and it's actually a media platform that I was actually brought in as the social media guru for as well. And with that said, these two are also hosts of The Screw, a New York-based sex education podcast. We had a very fantastic conversation that I'm really proud of to kick off the new year, but before I transition to that conversation, I just want to point out that if this is your first time hearing from either Felicia Rose or ALove, and you decide you want to hear more from them, check them out, then I suggest following them respectively on Twitter at Felicia Rose and at Continue78. You can also find, support, and buy sex content from Felicia Rose at Felicia Rose Raw on Twitter and FeliciaRose.manyvids.com. The Screw podcast itself can be found at The Screw NYC on Twitter, and it can be heard on both Stitcher and Spotify. And of course, the media platform itself, New Queer Order, which will be home to many podcasts like The Screw, like a newer podcast called Tranos and a Lived Experience. You can find them over at new_queer on Twitter and newqueerorder.com. Now, I know I just threw a bunch of links out there like it was nothing, but in case I was just going too fast or I just listed too many to keep up with, all of the links I mentioned are in the description below of the video or the audio file, however you are listening to this podcast, because there are many ways you can listen to this podcast. We're available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, Breaker, and just about every podcasting platform there is. In addition to that, this podcast can be found also on Twitter at CheckinPod, on Instagram at CheckinPodcast, and you can also find the entire episode catalog of this podcast over at upliftunited.com. My own media platform, so to speak. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's just dive right into this. How are you both feeling on a mental, physical, emotional level right now?
I will say this, right now I feel good. I think this has definitely been weird, days and a weird holiday season. And not because I'm like really into the holidays, but because all of my friends who really are have been definitely more down than I've seen them in the past. And, I have a hard time relating with that because I don't necessarily have the same holiday thing. I've been opting out from it for a very long time. So it doesn't bum me out in that way, but seeing my friends super bummed out and people really confused and conflicted sucks. So I feel a little, sad for that. And my health is pretty good. I slept well last night, so.
I have to agree. I don't also do the holidays. Like after my birthday, that's pretty much it in December. So I also, it's hard for me to relate, but at the same time, like my heart goes out to the people right now that are like feeling extra lonely and all those things. Like so many of my friends have reached out because they're just in a bad place right now. And it's definitely something that's worth noting, that, you know, it's valid. And it's just because like Aaron and I don't necessarily relate doesn't mean that we can't empathize. But also I feel like I'm in a good spot as well, which it almost feels kind of rotten to say, because in a weird way I feel like this year has definitely made me feel guilty in those moments when I was doing well, just because so many people aren't. So it's like hard to even sort of celebrate in a way when you're having those better times. But at the same time, we do have to, you know, the fact that we made it through this year alive and healthy is something to celebrate in and of itself. So that's something I'm really focused on and trying to remain as such.
And only to add on to that, like I think, like, you know, I'm very thankful for the privilege to have remained employed during COVID and all of this. And I know that's not been a lot of people's you know, situation. So you know, I acknowledge that things are a little bit easier for me because of at least that. But I just wanted to add, like, you know, I think my other frustration is usually during the holidays, and Felicia, you know, has been a part of this. I try to like do an alternate kind of like thing, like, hey, you know, because, you know, a lot of queer folks, you know, holidays are the fucking worst growing up, and I can definitely relate to that part. And you know, when these things happen, many of my friends don't talk to their families anymore for one reason or another. So it was always nice to have like a nice distractible thing where you can invite people over to, you know, your family of choice and your
Right.
community. But we can't even do that right now with COVID.
Right. Like normally I have like a little misfit Christmas thing myself. Like I don't celebrate Christmas, but I'll just be like, hey, Christmas Eve or whatever, you know, whoever's around in the Brooklyn area that doesn't have a place to go, that just wants to like be around people, come over. And like I couldn't even do that this year, which is because everybody was having their own misfit Christmas, you know. So it was like an interesting, you know, for once people were like at home feeling the way that I feel. So it's like it's definitely a weird kind of switch for myself in this time of year. But as far as the rest of the year, it definitely was no walk in the park. So
I think you both landed on something like really interesting there that I kind of want to expand on a little bit. Like you both said that the holiday experience can be a very lonely one, especially this year with COVID. But you also mentioned that the queer experience itself can be a lonely one in certain spaces. So I guess I want to ask, like, how do you both deal with, I guess, just loneliness and like more importantly, like you've also said, like cultivating your own, finding your own sort of, I guess, adopted family within the queer community, so to speak.
So, you know, this is a good thing, and I've gotten a little bit more fierce about the importance of this in the last few years. And um, chosen family is like a life resource, right? Like, you know, if you're a queer folk, you know, it's not just about you know, kind of understanding what that means. It's about having people to help you learn what that means, you know. I mean, and not just by a book or whatever, you know, a definition. It's like, what is actual struggle? How does this kind of place you in terms of how your family views you? And you know, what is relatable in those experiences to help kind of give people advice to navigate it a little bit better. I think that that is important, and it's something that, you know, I know Felicia and I heavily participate in. I would say when we say family, I don't think that there's many blood relatives that we're talking about
right.
when we use that term. So I think it's hard to say, how do you get that? Like, you know, we live in a very individualistic society, unfortunately, and it can be hard, especially for adults, to find other adults that are looking for friendships, you know, in a context of, I would really like to get to know you and like know you and care for you so well. You seem like family. I don't think we ever
Right.
present those relationships like that. But I think, you know, if that's always your intention and if that's what you're looking for, you will find it, you know, but you have to actually, you know, you have to want it. You have to know what that kind of means for you, I guess.
Right. I definitely I'm not gonna lie, a lot of my queer chosen family I've met through Aaron, and it's just because a lot of the spaces that I navigate outside of spaces with Aaron specifically are often, you know, heterosexual, heavily heterosexual, not necessarily fully, but there are a lot of spaces where like, friends growing up that I still have in my life, for example, are, not in my queer family, if you will. They're definitely, allies and they love me, but it's still not the same as like even just navigating those spaces myself, for example. It's not always the same. So I definitely have found myself sort of gravitating toward the people that Aaron keeps in his life, just because Aaron and I get along on such like an ethereal level that I really just expect that if Aaron doesn't like somebody in his space, it's because, and it's something that it's a person I'm probably not going to like either. And also if somebody's upsetting him in his space, he doesn't allow for that. It's like he has the couple friends that like he's had for lifelong, and it's hard to really get on the same wavelength as those people necessarily. But as far as like all of the newer friends that he's kind of built in the last like decade or so, all of those people are people that I instantly like gravitate towards. And then it's funny because anytime we kind of push away from somebody, it's at the same time too. So it's just an interesting experience that I've had personally. So I can't really even say where I've found those people, because I found them through Aaron, really. But the thing is I found Aaron through creating a queer space in our college. So while I would like to say like, oh, it's just through Aaron that I've met friends, it's like, well, that's one way to do it. Go out and create a safe space where you can, say there isn't, an LGBTQ plus, book club or something in your area, whatever the fuck it is that interests you. See if there's a place out there or space out there, even if it's online for now, where you can feel like you can be a part of it and be yourself. And that may be where you grow those relationships and friendships and find those people that would then be essentially your quote chosen family, especially when, for people that don't like have a hard time meeting people outside like the online world. And online is fine too. I mean, there's no reason why you can't have friends all over the country in different places that, make you feel just as like loved and welcomed as if you had friends that were sitting next to you on the couch,
Absolutely. I mean, I think also that family idea, for it to be family, people are, like get confused. I think for us and for me, it means it's not a family until kind of everybody is talking to each other and getting along. I can call you a family, so one of the things I was saying the other day, when I meet new friends, I do think of them in terms of my family. Is this person going to be a problem for anybody in my family? Like, I mean, I need them. I need to get an impression that they're going to get along with everybody in the family, or at least not harm anyone in the family. You start thinking of overall safety. We can't have safe spaces in terms of family if you have somebody that makes people uncomfortable and can't figure out to work and communicate that out. So
there's a difference between dialogue and debate and well people that are purposely trying to be harmful in spaces.
So yeah, I 100% agree with both of you. And to piggyback off of that a little bit, one thing I've learned in my life is that family isn't necessarily always an, for lack of a better word, intrinsic thing. It's not something you're really born into, especially for people who don't have the privilege of being on good terms with their like birth family. It's good to choose your family, like where to be the friends that you just come across who just feel, again, for lack of a better word, right. And in my experience, again, like it takes a certain trial and error to know when something feels right. And like there have been instances where I've kind of, I guess, been too carefree with my heart. I was willing to love everybody, and it kind of came back and bit me a little bit. But when you know something feels right, it's like a feeling in your gut, and like it feels like you said, like family. It feels, when being with that person feels like you're right at home. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Right. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And another thing, what you said is also important. Is just because somebody, might be in the same community as you, or a part of the same group as you, or whatever, has the same sexuality as you, doesn't mean that they automatically get a pass to be a part of the family, if you will. And I don't want to make it sound like a cult, but you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean that you automatically have to open your door to them. If somebody's harmful in general, you have to remember that. I think a lot of times people get passes for their harmful behavior because we're worried about, well, where else will they go? Well, people have to learn to not be harmful to one another. So if it's something you address and they can't figure out how to navigate that, then they shouldn't belong in your space too. So that's something to also pay attention to, is like, do an inventory check, make sure that everybody is there with good intent and good heart.
Right.
And that's the most important thing when it comes to finding those people in your lives, for sure.
Absolutely. And we all want to help people, but it can't be at anybody else's expense. And I've had that conversation with a lot of people who are like, yeah, but I just feel bad I have more resources. And I'm like, well, you have certain things that you need to protect in yourself and the people around you. You can't bring on somebody that is going to be dangerous to any of that. As much as we're well intentioned, it's not, the idea of helping and being an ally is not like supposed to be at your expense of your life and your comfort and your, well, comfort is a different word, but safety and health.
Right, exactly.
I guess that kind of leads me to another question, just because from certain conversation I've had, like, answering this is kind of a hard thing for people, I think, or at least seeing it. So I guess I want to ask, like, Aaron, you mentioned safety. So, like, what does being and feeling in a space look like to you? And Felicia, you can answer this as well as soon as Aaron's done.
For me, I mean, and it's a good question, because we can't really nail down a universal. We can give a general idea of what safety should look like, but every person has a different set of things that make them feel safe, right? I don't have, I'll just use the basic example that we can all relate to. I generally feel safe when I'm driving in a car. If I get pulled over by police, if I'm in a shopping center shopping, I don't feel like I have a threat from police officers. So I may not, I don't like them. I don't want them around, but it's not necessarily a safety threat. It's more of a comfort threat, right? Safety to me is there something that is really going to make me feel like living out of your comfort zone is one thing. I'm trying to say, and this is for me, I don't mind being uncomfortable as long as I don't feel unsafe. And as long as I feel like I'm in a situation where communication is happening. If you feel uncomfortable and can't assess whether that uncomfortability is really because you feel unsafe, then you should probably forego the situation. Because that to me says you don't feel like you're in a situation where you can talk about what's making you uncomfortable, and be able to say to people, hey, I feel a little uncomfortable about this. Can I check this out with you? I'm reverse engineering this question. So essentially, for me, when I go and I talk, when I'm trying to feel safe, it's, do I feel like the people I'm around are good communicators? Because it's not just a generalized thing. What if something literally happens, like an earthquake or a robbery? Do these people seem like people who are gonna fucking throw me under the bus or are gonna be there in solidarity to barrier the door? And I think that's, as far as safety goes, if I feel that I can talk to the people about anything, then I in general feel safe. But that's for me. Actual, like, family safety is about communicating with everybody around you. Like, does everybody feel good? People don't ask one another too often these days, how are they doing? Are you having a good time? There's this general assumption, if I invite you to something, it's your responsibility to enjoy yourself. Good luck. Now we're off to the races. It's like kind of some of the worst social behaviors exist in modern time. Nobody offers water when they come through the door. People get asked questions about themselves and never reciprocate the questions. Those are things my family kind of needs to do, because my family, we all need to feel like we care about one another. Otherwise, what are we wasting our time for? And that in general, I can deduce how healthy my life is by answering those questions. Do I feel good about the people around me? And do the people around me feel good about me?
I would agree. I think communication is a big piece of it. If you feel like you can't communicate, that's already an unsafe space, whatever the reason might be. So, comfort is one thing, because we're all we're all navigating this world, and there's going to be someone in the path that makes us uncomfortable. And sometimes it's a good discomfort, right? But like you said, when it comes to safety, that's, that's the key. If you feel like you are in a place of aggression, or if there are, things that are happening socially that are making you feel like you are being attacked in any way, like that's, and you can't articulate that, or you can't tell the host or something so that they can address it, or whatever the case may be, that's an unsafe space. So
Mhm.
I definitely think that, when navigating that kind of stuff, sometimes it's okay to ask those extra questions. I think a lot of times people are super nervous to get labeled as like, social justice warriors, or whatever the fuck you want to call it, as far as like caring about those things. But if we don't start those conversations and care about them to begin with, then we're just breeding more and more discomfort and lack of safety for our, friends, family, folks, whoever that we are putting in our bubble. So I
Mhm.
think it's really important to sometimes have those uncomfortable conversations, like, hey, I'm going to have my friend Sheila here, and instead of telling the person who maybe Sheila's going to hurl a microaggression or insult at, hey, be cool with Sheila's insults. How about you tell Sheila not to insult the person, right? Like there's a lot of that happens. The person that's going to be at the party that is, has the tattoos that, all the old folks are going to look at and talk about. Okay, in those spaces, I get it. But when we're talking about friend spaces, there should never be a person told, you're going to be uncomfortable, just deal with it. That's just how they are. I'm sorry. No, you tell the other person not to fucking act like that. I mean, those are
Mhm.
the times when it's okay to sort of, say this person's good enough for, this space 90% of the time. There's a small piece of them that we need to change the behavior of. It's okay to change their behavior instead of change someone else's expectations and comfort. I think
Mm.
a lot of times we forget that. We forget to like, we forget that it's the social norm is what you make it in that room, in that house, in that party you're hosting, whatever the situation is. If the social norm is that we do not make the roofie jokes because, everybody secretly knows that one of our friends got roofied and raped in the group, for example, maybe in every other space you make those jokes, but in that one space, sorry, too bad, bite your fucking tongue. There's just certain things that need to be sort of laid out for people. And if they can't respect those things, then they're not allowed in those spaces because they make them unsafe to begin with. I mean, I'm the queen of bad jokes sometimes. And even sometimes I have to go back and be like, fuck, I just put my foot in my mouth because I don't even know my audience. So those are
Right.
things to keep in mind. And like, yes, it's not a perfect diorama of how to fucking make it work, because obviously every single person is different, has different expectations and needs. But at the same time, like, if there's things you outwardly and openly know about people that are going to offend others, don't allow them in your space and just tell the other people to get over it. I hate that more than
Yeah,
fucking anything.
absolutely. I mean, that stuff, this is where like our love affair with the idea of respectability politics becomes problematic. You can have respectful and communicative discourse without it being, somebody feeling that their needs weren't getting met. That's we have like kind of trailed too far into, let's make sure everything's all set, okay, and everybody's cool ahead of time, rather than like, let's make sure we have a get together with people who can represent their needs, who can be concerned about people with the least amount of power in the room, and can communicate.
While you're talking, I was kind of curious about something, like just to, I guess, pivot. No, not necessarily pivot, because it's still on the subject of kind of like family and whatnot. So I was just kind of curious how you two met.
So in human sexuality psychology class, when we were both juniors in college, we were taking a night course, and it was like all of 10 people or so. And because of that, the teacher put us in like a circular formation so we could all like look at each other. And of course, I'm sitting across from this super tall dude, can't really tell his sexuality, can't really tell what his deal is. He's like smiling at me and like laughing like under his breath and then like I make a joke outwardly about I forget fucking what, and then he makes a joke back, and it was like love at first sight. And then like we would meet in the hallway after school or after class or like in between, on our break, and like chit chat. And then we realized we didn't have a queer organization at the school that was like current and up and running. And lovely Erin did all the paperwork, and we became the president and vice president of the Worcester State University What the fuck was it called?
I think it was the Pride Alliance. They may have
Yes,
tinkered with the name
that's it. Oh, and they
now.
still have the name, right? And so like
Yeah.
it's really cool to go back like 12 years later and see these people that are like, you know, successfully keeping our organization afloat, which is also really cool. But
wait, didn't they do better than that? Didn't they just create like a little LGBT center or something at
yeah,
Worcester
they made like
State?
a whole like library or some shit. They're so cool.
So cool.
So cool. But yeah, so that's how we met and we became like close friends. And then we ended up a year and a half later, after Aaron was done with some stuff, we packed up and moved our way to Brooklyn. And we've been thick as thieves ever since.
Right. The rest is herstory, as they would say.
That's awesome. How did that transition into you two having a sex education podcast?
Well, that actually started back in the day. So we originally started a little vlog online called Brooklyn Bound Debauchery, where we spoke about, we sort of did the same stuff, but like we would actually do one video a day. And it was the most, basically it was just an excuse to hang out with one another. But each day was like, honestly, it was just silly. But each day had like a different theme. And it would be like, what have we been watching Wednesday? And we talk about like the porn we watched. And we actually got up to like, we had like 100,000 views at one point on our shit.
Mhm.
And then because we like said some stupid joke or whatever, we got like nabbed by Daily Motion Police and they took us all down completely, which then just kind of happened right around the same time we both got really serious at our stupid 9-to-5 jobs. So it sort of just kind of worked out that like our shit was zapped off the internet because it kind of needed to be.
Right.
And then 10 years later, we moved back to the same city and we started to talk about doing it again. And now it's a podcast called The Screw.
And a broader like queer podcasting company. So let's hope it we want to make the world queer.
I'm really glad you mentioned that too, Aaron, because that's another thing I wanted to ask about. Like you two, you literally just founded your own like media platform company, and I'm very curious to see like how that came about and why you two decided to make that.
Felicia came up. I forget, we were sitting there and we were complaining about my partner Felicia and I were complaining about this old guard mentality. Like I respect and love my forefathers and foresisters of the queer struggle. But I started like, after the HIV crisis, it was sort of like we all kind of just started and obviously we know power doesn't work this way, that when things are separated and communities are taken apart, there's usually a larger force at power there. But a lot of things over the last 20-30 years that the community has been complaining about over and over again, whether it be substance abuse, disconnectedness, just kind of like a hookup culture with no care and love to it. Like these kind of things were things that everybody's like, or consent issues. My friends hate when I talk about this, but over the years, as a young queer person growing up, many older queer men touched me without my permission, being flirty at bars and kind of, well, if you're here, you're looking for something kind of attitude, which obviously we've taken from like the straight man's like guidebook on how to harass women. But that shouldn't be something that should be something we should be able to talk about and address in our culture. And I had many peers say, well, it's a rite of passage. Like, what are we going to do about it? It's like, you learn how to get stronger and fiercer by dealing with these things. And I'm like, well, let's be stronger and fiercer over something else and not like, sexual
and not
harassment.
give people fucking trauma.
Right, exactly.
Christ.
It's the world at large traumatizes us enough to like have to deal with traumas and microaggressions and labeling rules within our own community gets very frustrating. So hence New Queer Order, Felicia says, we're talking about this company and talking about names and having these old guard conversations, like being basically told to kind of suck up and deal with it. Like, be prideful, gay marriage is legal now, be happy. And it's like, okay, no, there's a whole bunch of stuff we need to deal with. We have a huge suicide rate in our community. We have huge amounts of poverty. If you're queer, you're 10 times like more impoverished in general than the population at large. Like, you know, we have trans brothers and sisters being murdered everywhere. You know, we can't, we need to do something, and we need to have a voice. We need to have more voices that elevate that. And, you know, Felicia's like, new queer order. We were like, yep, that's what it's called. Definitely, no doubt about it. And that meaning like, okay, we're done with this old guard shit. We're done with being like lesser evilism reality, being told this is all we can do. You can't have healthcare. You can't have this. The world isn't ready for it. It's ready for it when you say they're ready for it. And representation, you know, is also a problem. I don't know how many queer men I've seen over the years basically be like kill themselves to try to like have the wealth and money and access that a Will and Grace like character situation provides. Those apartments that that man has are impossibly expensive in New York City and not attainable to most people, gay or straight. So, yeah, I really think we need to see more people that represent our actual everyday realities, our actual everyday struggles, and that those need to be honest and not, you know, Andy Cohen kind of fucking, you know, makeup and glitter way. You know, we need to see people that remind us that we have other people that are going through what we're going through, and that we can find solidarity in those families, not outsidership in the fact that we can't make ourselves as wealthy or as good looking as all these other people say we should be.
Fuck yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of that's the point of it. And like honestly, I well, not the point of it, but the mission of it. And we really do want to just offer like an open call. Like if you have a voice that you do not see being represented and you feel like you want to put that voice out there because you don't see it represented, hit us up. You know, like
Yeah, I mean,
the queer
I think
experience is everywhere.
I think the biggest thing that Aaron didn't say is just Aaron wanted to create a space that allows for the underdog, if you will, or whatever the fuck you want to, the voice that isn't heard, the voiceless to be heard, the person that doesn't have the access to a fucking microphone and a podcast platform. We want that person to give us their story. We want those types of people to reach out to us and be a part of this, because we want to elevate voices from the down below that wouldn't get elevated otherwise. And whether we're not gonna, you know, it might be a slow burn and it might take a while for us to get the viewership and the listenership we want, whatever the case may be, but there are people that are listening and that need to hear those voices and those stories out there. And Aaron has now provided us a platform to be able to do that. And I think that it's just like, I'm honored to even be fucking a part of it, because like it's something that we needed, and there's no gimmicks, it's no fringes, it's just some DIY shit that we're putting together with fucking a couple fucking friends, right? And so like I think at the end of the day, it's kind of a proof of concept that like there needs to be more of this. There needs to be more you know, just LGBTQ plus voices out there everywhere, just speaking their truth and giving us their stories, their background, their livelihood. We want to hear about it, because we only get these cookie cutter perfect stories that fit molds on TV or, you know, on Twitter that go viral and shit like that. We don't hear these smaller stories in these subsets of different places and stuff. So it's like, fuck that. We need a place where we can get that person from, you know, Indiana in some random little town to fucking grab a microphone and start a podcast with us. So I think it's a great opportunity for so much. And there's going to be, it's just, I don't know. I'm excited to be a part of it.
Felicia doesn't give herself enough credit, obviously. She's more than a part of it. She's, you know, the idea springs from us all, you know. This would not be an idea without my family. And, you know, when you look and see what, you know, what you need in the immediate, when coronavirus hit, I saw 50 million people were losing their job. 50 million people. And I can't help 50 million people, but I can help like the people in my immediate family, like try to figure out what we're going to do to protect the rest of our family. And I mean, as much as like looks like a podcast for Felicia and I and my partner and other people that are in our family, it is more of a like, we should protect ourselves. Shit is going down. So let's like let's shore up the family. And that kind of idea, we are, quote unquote, I hate this quote, I'm not very fond of the political candidate that used this, but stronger together is most certainly a solidarity and movement kind of idea that like most definitely is something we need in these times. If employment retracts, and the queer and trans communities are already underemployed, we're talking about devastation, and not just I can't have my Netflix subscription this month. Like, I can't eat. I don't have housing. Like, no, I don't have health care. These are things, for me, it's not about exclusivity in the community. It's about where to start. I can't provide an opportunity for the whole world, but I can, with my family, try to think of brainstorming opportunities for us, because the only power in our current world in capitalism is money. And if you really want a seat at the table to push back and feel like you're surviving capitalism, you need some economic power. So really, in the end, we want to hopefully provide some self-sustaining employment for all of us in a very non-hierarchical manner, because we've all been fucked by the hierarchy. So
I don't like to talk about that, but yeah, I mean, eventually being able to employ more people and grow our community is a big goal. So I love that. Yeah.
But I mean, when we're talking about how do we support each other, I love the idea of emotional support, but you know, even amongst friends, like, I mean, I'm an honest guy. We all like loan each other money all the time. Felicia and I have more back and forth transactions than any other human being on fucking earth, like, and I love that. I love that, because we live in a world where families now, you have to draw out a interest bearing bank loan agreement before they will loan you fucking money in the middle class.
Yeah, you just have to be in one of my many vids and I got you. All good.
There you go.
Welcome to the family.
Exactly.
I'm kidding. That sounds like I'm trying to recruit people. I need to like chill with like my jokes sometimes. I feel like people can misconstrue
You're just trying to spread the wealth, girl. Trickle down.
Yeah. Trickle something.
Earlier, you mentioned that like spaces like these are important to mention, like show underrepresented voices. Like you said, like there's the queer voices that do have a platform in the mainstream media are very cookie cutter, so to speak. And like it's important to show the smaller voices who may not have access to a platform like this. And hopefully your platform helps bring about changing, well, not necessarily change the community, but like shows a bigger side to the community than what the average person sees. I think with that representation, that kind of representation, I think acceptance can come. I don't know if that makes sense or if it sounds too fluffy,
Yeah,
rainbowy.
it does not at all. I think you're onto a very big point and a very connection of the dots. These spaces, your space, our space, any of these spaces that are telling people, this is what the actual reality is. The problem with the representation currently is that if you're seeing that, and we live in a world where there's a lot of depression and a lot of things that come out of the inability to not be able to economically provide for yourself, whether you're worrying about where your next meal is coming from, or if you can make rent every month. I tell all of us, well, many of us have, like, in my little family, have like the stress of, oh my god, it's 5 days until the first. I may not make rent this month, and that is, if you add that and apply that to several years, that's like economic duress. And if you're visualizing yourself and seeing things and say, I should look like this, I should have enough money for Louis Vuitton or whatever the fuck, the problem is that's not in your ability to get, and it may never be. So that shouldn't be what success looks like. What does success look like in the real world for us? Maybe it's just not fucking crying tomorrow. Maybe it is not thinking about killing yourself twice a fucking month. Maybe it is like being able to look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself, I'm worthy and I love myself. Like, this is success. That confidence thing is supposed to stem out of feeling good about yourself. If we can't feel good about ourselves, which I'll argue with the representation available, that is set to make you always feel like fucking shit about yourself, because it's giving you something barely anybody has and it's feeding it to you in huge shoveled quantities. So these things that we do, these conversations we have, are to say, yeah, we need some independence and we need some resources, but we also need to not feel like shit about ourselves, because this is real and that is not.
Absolutely, I completely agree. I think you really, again, hit the nail on the head there. And from there, I kind of want to pivot to Felicia for a second, since you did mention your ManyVids content, and I kind of want to talk about your work as a sex worker. Is that the proper term? I don't want to be disrespectful
The
by
proper
any.
term is actually a therapist, but we can say sex worker. That's fine. As the sex.
Okay.
Jesus Christ.
Oh
They
my
kind
God,
of
that's so
got me
true though.
into- Yes, no, the proper term is sex worker. I like to say that I'm a therapist because really I think that most of what I do is mostly therapy. But yeah, I'm a sex worker. Yes.
I do really like that as a term, though, therapist. Let's go with that. And in your time as a therapist, like I've noticed that like the work of a sex worker kind of goes, if not overlooked, then just kind of, I guess, frowned upon. But I think you cultivate a means to wash away the stigma, for lack of a better term, I think. So I guess I want to ask first, like, just ask, like, how do we as a society kind of wash away that stigma towards sex workers?
Well, I mean, right now we're going through a ton with the different laws that are being put out there with, and like Pornhub and all these things getting pulled off the internet, and OnlyFans changing its rules. So being knowledgeable in how like voting and who you're voting for and how that affects the different people in your life. Like if you're pro sex work, then you should probably pay attention to politics a little bit. If you're pro, any kind of what people would call a deviant lifestyle, if you will, or whatever, any kind of, if you're pro any of that, like you really need to pay attention to where your vote goes. Right now, there are things being discussed that are going to take a huge toll on the sex work industry in general. And we've already had the Sesta Fosta situation happen, and that's going to be even worse in the future, is what it looks like. So the first step is just understanding that it's a job and it's a valid job. So as long as you realize that any job is a valid job if you're making money from the job and you're not exploiting anybody and harming anybody, then if you realize that that's a valid job, then you understand that sex work is one. And so my biggest thing is, a lot of people, you know, I don't want to shame anyone because of their financial situation. So if you cannot afford to buy porn and you still are a porn watcher, I understand. We've all watched free porn in the world.
Right.
But if you have that extra spare cash one day, support a local sex worker. I don't care if you send them $5 on fucking Venmo or whatever, their Cash App or whatever. Giving back to people that most of society doesn't recognize as even fucking a valid job, a valid lifestyle, a valid anything. That's a big piece of the puzzle, in my opinion. If more people just took their extra $10 and handed it to a sex worker, especially a marginalized sex worker, a trans sex worker, a Black sex worker, that's something that people don't pay attention to. And that's the first part of destigmatizing it, is realizing, look around, you have at least one friend that's a sex worker. If you don't think that posting your nudes on OnlyFans for money is sex work, then you're wrong. It's sex work. If you don't want to call it that, that's fine. But at the end of the day, you have a sex worker friend out there, especially in these times. A lot of us have had to go onto the internet and put our naked bodies out there. So I think people need to show more respect to sex workers, validate, share the news that this is happening and these laws are getting passed, because it doesn't just affect sex workers, it affects the sex work that we consume as well. So if you are just simply a person that watches a lot of porn, your options of what you're going to be watching are going to change if you don't pay attention to the what's being talked about in legislation or being passed as bills, for example. So I think people need to understand, like, it's not just something like, oh, I'm going to show my feet on OnlyFans. It's a fucking job. It takes literally 12 hours a day. If I want to make just the salary of a fucking starting teacher a year, I literally have to work 12 hours a day. And I'm not talking about Monday through Friday. I'm talking about Monday through Sunday. I'm talking about during Christmas. I'm talking about on my birthday. Even on the days when I say I'm taking a day off and I announce it to the world, I'm still promoting my shit. So there's a lot that goes into it. We are all our own fucking businesswomen, unless for some reason you have the access and, privilege of having someone else in your circle that say, will film with you or film for you. Most of us are doing this all on our own. And, we're the ones putting ourselves at risk, whether it's for COVID or for an STI, if we're filming with other people. There's so much that goes into it. Fucking message your local sex worker and be like, can I pay for your next Planned Parent bill? Like, what the fuck ever, give to Planned Parenthood. Like, I said Planned Parent, I meant Planned Parenthood, but there's different things that you can do that support sex workers that isn't necessarily having a many vids charge on your credit card, so there's different ways that you can help people out. And also just spreading that knowledge and staying up to date and making sure that you are, again, voting the right way and making sure that we pay attention to these things. Like, sex workers are the most likely group of fucking women to fucking, die of a fucking violent death. And it's something that, like, we can't just forget that there's also our street workers out there. There's also our strippers out there. There are people that are really being put out right now. And so we need to just, do what we can to educate the public, but also destigmatize it by just making it normal. Tell people you pay for your porn. The more you tell people you pay for your porn, the more you set a good example. And then the next person's going to consider paying. Oh shit, this dude buys Felicia's porn. Fuck, it's good enough to pay that $26.99 a month. Oh fuck, you know what? I'm gonna fucking sign up. And guess what? You just put fucking a dinner, and half of my money goes back to other people to begin with. So you're helping, like, a trickle down fucking sex worker thing too, So it's just like, I'm not saying just give me your money. I'm saying in general, like, no matter what, you're helping out somebody that probably really fucking needs it. So it's something to pay attention to,
And you know what, if I can just say, Felicia, like, and so, like, I'm okay with the idea that people are uncomfortable with sex work. The only thing I would tell them, if you're actually uncomfortable with sex workers and sex work, why don't you try to do something to create a more fucking civil society so it's not required? We have a world of which we don't provide enough jobs for every citizen. We don't provide enough food for every citizen. We don't provide enough housing. If you're gonna live in this doggy dog world of, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, sex work has to be a valid option. Otherwise, there's no other options. If you start creating a kind of, let's say, I'm not a huge fan of the idea, basic income for everybody. If you really have such a quandary and worry about sex workers and sex work being exploitive, why don't you start supporting things like that? So, maybe they don't have to work Monday through Sunday selling nudes or street work or any of those things. We can't be the kind of society anymore that has their heads in the sand and doesn't recognize that sex work occurs because we don't have any other resources for people. Some people absolutely choose to go in sex work as a preference, but the question is always asked, where in our society would sex work stand if people had everything that they need, basically water, housing, food, healthcare? What would the viability and the need of that be?
Right. And I still would probably do sex work because I enjoy it, but I enjoy it because I don't have to do it. Right. I can go back to a 9 to 5 any fucking goddamn time I want. Now, is my name being Googleable a problem? Yes. I've probably really sown the fucking seeds of not being able to go back. But let's pretend like I'm now Googleable in a perfect world. And it's not a big deal. And I go back. I can go back to a motherfucking 9 to 5. Not everybody can do that. So, the idea of people having the option is a beautiful fucking thing. So people have to remember there's two types of sex workers. There's sex workers that don't have to do it and are doing it because they want to do it as their job. They have other options, and there's sex workers that don't have other options. You have to remember that in the hierarchy of things as well. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's and it doesn't make one more valid than the other. Every fucking sex worker is valid, and what they do is fucking valid, because there is a need for it, and there is a fucking, and that's the thing, is like, yes, it would be awesome for the people that don't want to have to do it to not have to do it. The people that want to continue doing it can't continue doing it, right? So like, I
Right.
agree with what Aaron says, like, create a society where people aren't forced into the sex worker industry, so that there isn't that exploitive side to it, and instead it's more of a, 100% we're all here under consent.
Right. And if you want to make life safer and healthier for sex workers under our current economy, stop trying to legislate them. The only legislation for sex workers should be legality. Like, that is the only legislation that is going to make a safer environment for sex workers. All of your like things about making it illegal for the client versus the whatever, all of these kind of these things, they give cops and law enforcement more opportunities to arrest and harass. Like, it doesn't improve the way sex work feels or looks or the safety of it.
Right. And people will always bring up the child trafficking problems that go on within that stuff, but again, the root of the problem there is literally mental fucking health. Again, if we have more of that in our fucking country, for example, this shit isn't going to go on. We're going to be able to stop predators before they become predators, right? So like, there's this whole cycle of like, we're targeting the wrong group. We're targeting adult consent sex workers and ruining their fucking lives and livelihoods. And in exchange, we're not actually putting a stop to the real threats out there. And that's the problem. And so like, I think that there's this blurred line of like, well, what about the kids? No, the kids will be fucking fine. Just because Susie, the 26-year-old, wants to do porn and spread her legs on the internet does not mean that your kid's going to get abducted. As long as, we have if we have the right legislation in place, all of these sites will be run properly, and there won't be any kind of fucking, there won't be any kind of like wiggle room for any of that. You know what I mean? So like, it's just the root of the problem is not sex work as an industry. The root of the problem is essentially mental health and getting to these people and fucking figuring out what's going on in their brains way before they become fucking predators and prey on anybody to begin with. That's how I feel.
And I absolutely agree with that. Like, I feel like sex work is just like any other job, something you either need to do or you're wholeheartedly passionate about. And something that, if it's something that makes you happy, especially, then there should not be a stigma around it. Like, in my opinion, like, someone who's judging or adding to the stigma of the sex work job, like, if it doesn't add anything to you if you judge someone, and it's just making someone else's life and job harder. So why even put that energy out in the world, So
well, and also that's like little dick energy. I'm sorry, I'm gonna fucking say it. And no shame to my little dick people out there. And if you do like shame, I got mad SPH videos, so holler. But honestly, that's some like dusty cock energy. I'll say dusty cock energy right there.
Dusty
because
cock.
I don't want to shame size. I don't like to shame. It's dusty cock energy. What that means is, seriously,
what if you ain't got a duster for that cock?
Every time you tell somebody out there that you don't fucking buy your porn, all you're saying is, I'm a cheap motherfucker. You know what? I don't give a fuck. If you can't afford to buy your porn, shut up and sit at the back of the class. No one gives a shit. Okay, click on my GIFs and jerk off to them all you want. What the fuck ever. But you don't have to fucking announce it like you're telling I'm so fucking macho. I don't even spend money on porn. You know what? The hottest thing in the world is someone that will drop a fucking $200 on my whole fucking set and boom. You know what I mean? Like, that shit gets me wet. Fuck that shit. Oh, I don't buy. I'm sorry, but I don't have to buy porn. Oh, that's nice. Well, everybody that's ever bought porn for me has gotten a blowjob. How do you feel about it now, you motherfucker? I mean, that's not true, but
I mean, I think that's
blowjobs.
You know what, Felicia, you tread into like a very interesting question that I have. Like, I always want to ask these people who comment on things like that, what is your point? What was your purpose of putting this sentence down? Are you trying to like, because you weren't
And
directly addressed. So you're
right,
clearly trying to shame someone in this conversation, either someone thinking about it or the person, doing it. So, you not doing that, great. You can keep that to your fucking self unless you have a purpose for making that statement and you like elaborate on what that purpose is. You are just another fucking jackass trying to be an asshole online.
right, exactly. Literally, it's like I said, it's dusty cock energy. Like
Dusty cock shit.
yeah, like you didn't moisturize your dick for mad long, and it's mad dusty. Like, no, it's dusty. You gotta moisturize your shaft, honey. Like, no, like there's crust around, like the corona, right around the corona. It looks like a virus. How about that?
Oh, no,
That's
wait, Felicia, you gotta tell people what corona. I found like barely any dudes know what the fucking corona is.
Oh, the corona is the like right where your head meets the shaft. It's like that little like area right there.
Education 101.
Yes. So that's why when it was like coronavirus, when it first dropped, I was like, oh, that's funny, because I thought, we're talking about dicks, and then
A virus
like, oh.
around the corona.
Yeah.
That may have been how it started, actually, though.
Yeah, it's because dudes. That's how coronavirus started. It's dudes that didn't pay for their porn.
Dusty dick dudes started the coronavirus.
And they had virus around their corona because their dicks were so dusty. That's how this shit started.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that might be a perfect time to end this, not only because that's just a great place to end it, but because I'm out of juice. Like this goes a little longer than I planned, so I apologize for making this so long, by the way. But
no worries.
It's very organic.
We're the ones that made it long. What are you talking about?
Exactly. We're the ones that won't shut the fuck up. So.
Well, either way, I really loved having you two on. Then I actually have to make this a little longer because there is one last segment I like to end every episode on. I actually call it giving people their flowers, where if we never talk again for every reason, like you actually know why I appreciate you. And I appreciate you both for one thing, let me be your social media guru for your media platform. I'm very happy to be a part of this. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Welcome to the team.
Exactly. B has a thumbs up for you, so we have a thumbs up for you. Good to go.
And I'm very happy to have it. And on top of that, I just appreciate you both for just the tremendous work you do in the queer community and in sex education spaces, both with a platform like this and for your podcast. Like the weird thing is that like me as an asexual, like it's hard for me to relate to sex, but like I love talking about it, like hearing how people respond and love sex. I think that makes for fascinating conversation, and you've always had fascinating conversations for as long as I've been hearing from you. And I think you both do a lot of great things, both in podcasting, social media, sex work, wherever it may be, to kill the stigma surrounding having conversations like this. And I appreciate you both in that space for that. Why I've been a fan of your podcast for so long. And I just appreciate you both for not only just coming on this podcast, for being on what's going to be the first podcast of 2021. Thank you so much.
Oh, shit. I didn't know that. Good thing you didn't tell us that. That was a lot of pressure.
No pressure. Thank you. That was like really sweet. And
Very sweet.
to give you your flowers, thank you for being a new but also very important piece of the puzzle. And thank you for having a podcast that talks about such important stuff, because that's mental health. I mean, what else do you have, right? Physical and mental health. So I think that's super great. And also thank you for having a wonderful grasp of the English language, because you're making my life very easy. Sorry, I had to give you some flowers back.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe, for these opportunities. And like, this is very important stuff. You're talking, and you have come up with very thoughtful questions, and I appreciate like the opportunity to talk about those things.
Hell yeah.